Hello everyone, welcome to the video for chapter 14, which is all about flight planning. So when it comes to flight planning today, a lot of us are going to use some nice tools such as we'll probably have an electronic flight bag running something like WingX or ForeFlight, and we're going to say, hey, here's where I want to go to and from, and it's going to draw lines for us. It's going to get the weather. It's going to figure out, what's my wind corrections and all those things. And honestly, very few of us are going to sit around with a mechanical E6B flight computer and calculate this stuff by hand. Not that you couldn't do it. It's just that we don't do that very much anymore. So I kind of wanted to walk you through planning a flight. Now, if I'm doing this on my tablet, it's going to be pretty easy to do. And what I'm going to do is just show you some easy stuff I can do with some free stuff online. It's a little bit easier to show you at least. So, step one, I'm going to take a trip. I have to decide where I want to go. Now, in our previous session together, we decided that we would take a trip from Bloomsburg to Wellsboro to Williamsport and then back to Bloomsburg. So I'm here back at Sky Vector. We visited this site last time. And if you click on Flight Plan, you can actually do a flight plan. If you have an account, you can get this filled in for you. And I'm not going to bother with that right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to accept defaults here. I'm going to say I want to depart November 1-3, and I'm going to go to November 3-8. And that's this part of my trip. Now, it's going to ask me things like, what altitude are you going to fly at? And right now it's saying 8,000 feet. So I am going to say, well, what would be an appropriate altitude? But we'll come back to that here in a little bit. So when I'm going to make a trip like this, first thing I'll do is draw the straight line. Next thing I'm going to do is ask myself, should I deviate from this straight line for some reason? Maybe. It might make sense to do so. Why would I do that? Maybe there's some obstacles. Maybe there's some airspace. You can see that I'm getting kind of close to Williamsport, but not really that close. And so I might need to deviate a little bit. So once I've picked my route, then I can go to my next item. Now, when we talked about things like radio navigation, if I wanted to do radio navigation instead of, just line of sight and probably backing this up with a GPS, I could possibly say go to Williamsport to this VOR. And then I could maybe even go to this VOR, Stony Fork, and then go in. So let me go ahead and alter my path just to show you how this works. So I'm going to say, all right, I want to go to FQM. And then from FQM, I'm going to go to SFK. And now it's changed my routing. Don't have to do that. Just showing you how I could do that. All right, so we'll go back to the straight in path instead. Now, for it to count as a cross country, it has to be more than 50 nautical miles away. And I see here it says 61.6, so I'm good to go there. It's also saying it's going to take you about 35 minutes at 110 knots at 8,000 feet, given the current winds. Well, I probably don't want to fly at 8,000 feet. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, there are standard altitudes that I fly at. And these standard altitudes start 3,000 feet in the air. And if I'm going eastbound, then I want to fly at an odd 1,000 plus 500. If I'm going westbound, it's an even 1,000 plus 500. So I'm going generally westbound. My heading is between 180 and 359. So I want to go, let's say, at 4,500 feet. And now you'll notice that my time went down a little bit. And why is that? Well, partly because the winds are coming out of the south. Okay, so if I'm flying along this direction, it's going to take me about 32 minutes. You know, how much fuel am I going to burn? You know, if I figure I'm burning 10 an hour, if I'm really pessimistic. And for my speed, if I'm flying something like the old Cessna, I better not figure 110 knots. 110 knots is probably what you're going to get out of the new Cessna, and the old one's going to be more like 100. Okay. So it's going to take me about 35 minutes to fly up to the PA Grand Canyon from Bloom. Now, if I click on Navlog here, it will show me my headings and such. So if you look in the book, it'll say, all right, what's my wind direction? What's my wind speed? And you'll notice I start at the ground, and then as I climb, it's going to change. My true airspeed, I'm going to start by climbing at like 65. And then I'm going to go 100 in my cruise phase. What's my track going to be? What's my wind correction? It's -5 and then -12. And so what's my heading going to be? What's my true heading going to be? And then I have to adjust for my magnetic variation in this area, which is +12. 12 to the west, and west is best. So my ground speed is going to be 72, then 113, and 111 during my descent. What's the distance that I'm going to cover? What's my estimated time en route? And how much fuel am I going to burn? So that's my nav log. And again, if I do this on my tablet, I'm going to get something a lot nicer. What else should I be doing? So let's just start, we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to basically plan 2 flights. We're going to plan our flight to Wellsboro and then our flight back. We're going to plan those as separate flights. So we picked our altitude. We made sure that we were above all these MEFs, maximum altitude, that I will use to clear my obstructions in each quadrangle. And that's good. 4,500 should be just fine to clear this stuff. It's also going to give me a little bit of a tailwind. I'm getting a little bit of a push today because the winds are out of the south. So going higher is kind of better in that case. Okay. Any other considerations? Yeah, I should do my research. I should know about the airport that I'm going to land at. Yes, I can look at the chart here and I can see what it says. Wellsboro, Johnston, November 3-8. AWAS, okay, it's got an AWAS. And it's got a Unicom 122.8. 1892 is its elevation. Part-time lighted 3,600 foot strip. Well, what's the runway? Looks kind of east and west, but are you sure? Maybe it's 927, maybe it's something else. So you want to consult that lovely electronic chart supplement, or again, you're probably going to use your tablet, your EFB, and it's going to already have this stuff in it. All right. What else do you want to know? Where are you going to do when you get there? You know, is there a courtesy car? Are you going somewhere? You need to check that out. Is there, you know, a tower? There's not a tower here, but, you know, is there a parking fee? Do they have fuel? These are all good things to know. By the way, I did find this site recently. It's airport courtesy cars. And they have a list of airports with courtesy cars. So you can say, I want to go to Pennsylvania. And then you can look and say, do they have a courtesy car up at this airport? And it's, oh, sure enough. Right here, Wellsboro. They have a small SUV. Contact the FBO manager. Here's their number. You know, I wouldn't use just this site. In fact, I just recently discovered this site. But again, do some research. You know, do they have multiple FBOs? Sometimes that's the case. Where are you going to go? You don't want to land, especially at a towered field, and then have them ask you, hey, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know. I want to go somewhere. I want to park. Okay. Well, there's 6 different options. Where do you want to go? I don't know. If you go to a towered field, by the way, and they have multiple places that you can buy fuel, they are not allowed to recommend one or the other. It's against the rules. They have to be impartial with air traffic control. Okay, so, well, that was a pretty simple trip. What about coming back? How am I going to come back? Well, let me go ahead and reverse my trip. And again, on your EFB, normally it's going to have a little button you can press that says, hey, reverse my flight plan. So I'm going to go from November 3-8 to November 1-3. By the way, you'll notice when I accidentally clicked on this, it took me to another good site, AirNav. So AirNav will tell you all about a particular airport. Okay, I guess it didn't take me to AirNav, but it tells me a little bit more about this airport and some other nearby airports. But AirNav's a nice site. It'll tell you about things like fuel and fuel prices and all that kind of stuff. Maybe some reviews from people who have been there. And once again, we said we were going to stop at KIPT. So that's our flight back. And we are going to once again go at 100 knots. Now going back, what altitude should we fly? We're going eastbound now. So we could go at 3,500. We could go at 5,500 or 7,500. So let's go with 3,500 for a couple reasons. The wind is in my face. So if the wind is in my face, the higher I go, the longer this trip's going to take. Now, check this out. What was it, like 35 minutes to get there? And it's 48 to get back today. So once again, I'm drawing the straight line path. There's no real obstructions or anything in my way. And, okay. I pick my altitude. I can look at my nav log. You'll see my ground speeds are a lot less. 51 during my climb. 77 en route. And then after I go to Williamsport, it's now 85 and then 86 in my descent into Bloom. So it's going to take me a lot longer to get there. I definitely need to do some research on Williamsport, especially if I'm going to land there. If I'm going to really land there, I need to know, I wanted to go to Energy Aviation, or, I should at least know that there's only one GA ramp. If you're in doubt, you can say, I want to go to the GA ramp. And let's say, okay, you can go over here. Other considerations on your trip: you should file a flight plan and or get flight following. We talked about flight following before and how that works. But they don't have to give it to you. Okay. Now, the other stuff in your book, again, they'll show you how to use a mechanical E6B. It's kind of interesting. They'll show you how to fill out a log. It's also interesting. Something I would recommend you do. Don't get super lazy. All right. I realize that, yes, most of the time you're going to have GPS today and all of that. But still, do pick some checkpoints. When you go for your flight test, you will have to plan a cross country. You will have to at least start that cross country, and you have to have some checkpoints. You can't just say, I'm going to fly from Bloomsburg to Wellsboro, and that's it. I have no checkpoints. I'm just going to fly. I'm going to use GPS. It's like, what if your GPS goes out? Well, I'm just stuck. You don't want to be just stuck. The battery to your tablet dies, and you're in a bad way. So you need to be able to do, regular navigation and pilotage, where you can look at a chart and figure out where you're at. Use a VOR. We talked a little bit about using VORs last week and how you could use that to back things up. You can say, this is the radial off of this VOR to this airport. Or, maybe I'm going to use, this part of the river, and I'm going to back it up with a VOR radial. Things like that you can do. All right. Now, I know we said that this was the cross-country one we're going to plan, but just to show you how things can be a little bit more complicated, I'm going to say, what if I wanted to go on a little trip over this way? And I'm going to go to LDJ, Linden. So I'm going to go from November 1-3 to LDJ, KLDJ. All right, so first things first, here's my straight line path. Oops, let me get rid of Williamsport. Now here's my straight line path. It's 102.4 nautical miles. And it's going to take me over an hour in my mighty 172 today. Right. So looking at the straight line path, first thing I notice, Lehigh Valley. Right. So my Class C airspace, I'm just about to nick that. And if I do, in fact, fly at 3,500 feet, what's going to happen? I'm going to be within the range between 2,800 to 4,400. I could go up to 5,500 feet. I could also just talk to them, which is what I would recommend. You know, a trip like this, especially, I would try to get flight following. So I'd be calling Wilkes-Barre as soon as I took off. And they're usually pretty nice, and they're going to give me a handoff. They're going to say, okay, well, you know, here's New York Center. You can talk to them, and here's Allentown Approach. You can talk to them for a little bit, and then they'll pass you back to New York Center. All right, as I get closer in here, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Let me zoom in a little bit. So check this out. I've got airspace right here. This is 3 miles from Newark, by the way. It's very close. And you'll notice this airspace in here, it says it goes up to 7,000, and it says plus 0.8. So at 801 feet, that is where this Class B starts. So you better be pretty low. And guess what the traffic pattern altitude is here? It's 800 feet. This little area, it's down to 500 feet. And then it goes to 1,200 feet. So yeah, it's a little dicey here getting in. So even if I come across this way, I take the straight path. This is down to 1,500 feet. Now, thankfully, the elevation of this airport is only 22. But look what happens if I stray too far this way. Morristown, Towered Field, Essex, Towered Field. We got Teterboro, which is not really in our path going this direction, but again, a nice, busy Towered Field. So how would I come in and approach this airport? Well, you're going to have to come in, and you're going to expect that you're going to have to shoot under this. So when I'm out this far, I'm already going to have to shoot down below 3,000 feet. And it's going to feel really weird if you're not used to doing this, because you're flying over a populated area at a super low altitude down here. And you're just going to come in, and, you know, if it's runway 9 that you're using, you're going to come in and just boom, land. Now, when you take off, if you take off on runway 9, you're probably going to want to turn like right away. Again, this is really, really low here. And this is as zoomed in as it gets. It gets a little bit more zoomed in, you know, of course, if you had a terminal area chart. And of course, if you wanted to, say, fly up the Hudson here, that's doable. But there's actually a class online that you can take in order to know how to do that. And we mentioned this earlier. We said, what if you wanted to go to, let's say, Washington, D.C.? You know, maybe you want to go here to Manassas. Good old Hef. So if I say, all right, I want to go to K-Hef. Number one, you must have gotten the training on flying in the DC Special Rules area. That's this big red circle here. Number two, look at my straight path. My straight path goes right across Dulles. And then it brings me in here to K-half, which is a towered field in Manassas. So, again, I'm going to want to alter from that straight line path. Now, what do I want to go to? That's a good question. You might want to shoot out here because even out this far, notice how low this is. 2,500 feet, 1,500 feet. I'm not loving that. So I would probably try to pick a navigable point out this way, maybe even, just for sake of argument, I might try LDN. I might say, all right, I'm going to do this via LDN. And now I'm avoiding all of that, right? I still have this 2,500 foot when I get really close in, but it's not quite as bad. So that's a nice example of wanting to alter your course. And oh, guess what I did? I just caused another problem. There's a prohibited airspace here, and then there's a restricted airspace over here. All right, well, what can I do to avoid that? Well, I could go further this way, or I could come in this way and then swing back out. So, maybe I want to go to, let's see, what's this little airport here? Franklin County Regional, November 6-8. So I'm just going to add that in. November 6-8. What does that do for me? That's got me avoiding this area. So again, things are a little bit complicated when you start flying down toward DC. You don't have to go that far. Okay. So that's pretty much it. That's the basics of making a flight plan. Again, pick where you're going to go. Draw the straight line. Ask yourself, do I need to deviate from that straight line? Yes or no? If you are, then figure that out. Pick your altitude. Say, what altitude do I need to fly at? Well, I need to not fly into stuff. So I'm going to look at my minimum altitudes for each of my quadrangles, looking at my MEFs, my maximum elevation figures. And that's going to help me. And I'm going to look at things like the winds, right? If I'm more than 3,000 feet above the ground, I need to do the odd thousands plus 500 if I go east, because odd ducks fly east. If I'm going west, it's going to be an even 1,000 plus 500. My tablet software is going to tell me, hey, this is the most efficient altitude. This is where you're going to get the best speeds. Now, it'll also warn me, like, sometimes you're going to have to climb a lot. And it might even say that it's going to be really cold up there. My tablet actually will say cold next to an altitude if it's a little bit nippy. So, once you've gotten that, then you want to plot things out. You want to make sure you have up-to-date information, charts. You're checking TFRs. And that's another nice thing with electronic flight bags. If there's a TFR and you've connected to the internet recently, it's going to depict it. Like here, there's a TFR. We'll be live in 23 hours. We'll be live in 24 hours. There's a TFR over DC. So now you plan out your flight. You get every bit of information you need. If you're going to stop somewhere, you better know about that airport. When you stopped at Williamsport, you know where you want to go. If you went to, let's say, Lancaster, just for grins, of course, that would really mess up this flight. But if you were flying to Lancaster, you should know things like, I want to go to the West Ramp. Why do you want to go to the West Ramp? Well, for one thing, that's where the restaurant is. They were a really nice Italian restaurant there. There's a little gate, and they have a code by the gate that changes somewhat often. And just remember the gate code so you can get back to your aircraft. But you can go to the restaurant there and, have a nice meal. Don't drink if you're flying back, though. I mean, your passengers can drink a little, but you not so much. Not at all, actually. And yeah, go have your fun, have a flight, and enjoy yourself. Make sure you pick some checkpoints along the way to make sure that you're making the progress that you think you're supposed to make. Of course, there are things to consider like fuel burn, but that's the subject of the next chapter on performance. So this brings us to the end of chapter 14, which is about flight planning, getting from there to here, or getting there from here, I should say. So I'll see you guys in the next video.